It was supposed to be a family vacation, 3 generations under one roof at the Ocean View Hotel in South Carolina. The kind of trip I dreamed of since my husband died. But that morning when I came down from my room, clutching my cardigan against the cold air from the lobby vents, something felt wrong. Their luggage was gone. So were their smiles. "Excuse me," I asked the front desk clerk, a polite young man with freckles. "Did my son Mark say where they went?" He hesitated. "They checked out, ma'am. Said you'd meet them later." "Meet them later." My heart thudded. My phone showed no missed calls. Only a family photo from last night, Mark, his wife Stephanie, and my granddaughter Olivia, all pretending to love me for the camera. I sat on the couch near the window, watching cars pull away. My hands trembled as I reached for the paper cup of lukewarm coffee someone left behind. There was a lipstick mark on the rim, Stephanie's shade. That was when the rain started. Hours crawled by. I called, texted, begged the hotel staff to double-check. Nothing. I was alone, abandoned in a place that suddenly felt foreign. Then around midnight, the lobby phone rang. The clerk looked around confused before picking it up. He frowned. It's for you, Mrs. Brooks." "For me?" I whispered, taking the receiver. A voice came through the static, trembling, terrified. "Mom, it's Mark. Please, you have to help us. Something's wrong. We can't leave the hotel." Before I could answer, the line went dead. What could have possibly happened between the time they left me and that phone call? Would you have answered if you were me? My name is Helen Brooks, and I've spent 68 years believing that if you love your family hard enough, they'll never leave you behind. I was wrong. Before the Ocean View Hotel, before the silence of that lobby, there was my little yellow house in Columbus, Ohio. Every inch of it smelled like lemon polish, and the faint tobacco my husband Robert used to smoke. I'd kept everything the same since he passed his worn armchair. The calendar still turned to March 2009, the month he died. When Mark, my only son, came by one Sunday, he didn't even look around. He just stood by the door with his keys jangling. "Mom," he said, "you shouldn't live here alone anymore." Stephanie and I found a great place, 4 bedrooms near a golf course. We could all move in together. You'd love it. I wanted to believe him. I sold my house for $280,000, wiring the money directly to his account. He said it would help with the down payment. He smiled when he promised, "You'll always have your own room, Mom." The first few weeks in their new house were fine, at least on the surface. Stephanie bought new furniture, all gray and glass. Nothing warm or homey. My things stayed in boxes. "Just until we redo your room," she said with that brittle smile. By Thanksgiving, the boxes were still unopened. Olivia barely spoke to me anymore. At dinner, she rolled her eyes when I asked about school. "Grandma, nobody calls it homeroom anymore." She laughed, glancing at her mother. Stephanie smirked. Mark didn't defend me, he just kept cutting his turkey. The next morning, I overheard them in the kitchen. "She's slowing us down, Mark," Stephanie whispered. "We can't keep paying her bills. Maybe it's time she, moves somewhere smaller." My heart cracked. Bills. They were my savings paying for their mortgage. When I confronted Mark later, his face turned cold. "Mom, you're overreacting. Stephanie just worries, okay? You've been confused lately." Confused. That word stung more than any insult. Still, I kept quiet. I made excuses. That's what mothers do. We protect our children even from their own greed. Then came the family vacation. Mark said it was his way of thanking me. "You deserve a break, Mom." Ocean View's beautiful. It was. The sea breeze tasted like freedom, and for 2 brief days I let myself believe things were mending. Stephanie even bought me a sun hat. Olivia took a selfie with me, but on the 3rd morning their laughter changed. It became quieter, sharper. They spent hours whispering behind the balcony door, and when I asked what was wrong, Stephanie only said, "Nothing. Helen, just relax. You worry too much." That night, I heard their suitcase wheels roll down the hallway. If I'd known that was the last time I'd hear my son's voice in person, I would have said something more than, "Good night." But what do you say? When your family has already decided to leave you behind, after that Thanksgiving, things in the house started to rot, not visibly, but in the quiet ways that eat through a family, like termites through wood. Stephanie stopped inviting me to dinner. She said it was because you eat too early, but really it was because she didn't want me around her friends. When guests came over, I was asked to rest upstairs. Sometimes I'd hear laughter drifting up through the vent laughter about me. She still writes checks, Stephanie giggled once. Like it's 1985. Oh, come on, Mark said. She means well. Yeah, she snorted until she forgets what she's written. I pressed my ear to the vent and swallowed hard. I hadn't forgotten anything. They used my money to renovate the kitchen marble counters, stainless steel appliances, a $3,000 espresso machine. Yet every month, I found the bills piled in my name. When I questioned Mark, he waved me off. Mom, the utilities are in your name for credit reasons. I'll pay you back. He never did. I started keeping notes receipts, bank transfers, copies of The Wire. Maybe some part of me knew I'd need proof someday. I hid them inside one of Robert's old mystery novels on my nightstand. One afternoon, Olivia barged into my room without knocking. "Grandma, why do you keep all this junk?" She kicked at a stack of boxes marked kitchenware. "Mom says you're hoarding." I smiled weakly. "Sweetheart, those are memories." She rolled her eyes. "Whatever. Mom says you're stuck in the past." When she slammed the door, I sat on the bed, my chest aching. Maybe I am stuck, I thought. Stuck believing that love meant loyalty. The day before the trip, Stephanie came to my room with a wide grin. "Pack something nice, Helen. Ocean View Hotel has a gorgeous spa. Mark booked it for you." A spa. It sounded like peace. Maybe they wanted to start over. At the hotel, everything gleamed, golden chandeliers, the ocean scent mixed with vanilla candles. For the first time in years, I felt almost human again. We had dinner at the terrace restaurant, laughter floating in the sea breeze. But then Stephanie's phone buzzed, and her smile disappeared. She turned the screen away from me, whispering to Mark. His jaw clenched. I caught fragments of their hushed words: transfer, signature, account. Later that night, I walked past their room and saw the light under the door. I heard Mark say it'll be easier if she thinks it's just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding about what? I pressed my hand to the door but couldn't knock. My son's voice, the same boy I once rocked to sleep, sounded like a stranger's. By morning, they were gone. Their empty bed sheets still smelled like ocean salt and betrayal, and as I stood there in the doorway, I finally realized this wasn't confusion. This was a plan. The morning they left me, the sun was cruelly bright, the kind of light that exposes every ugly truth. I remember the clock on the nightstand blinking 7:12 a.m., the room smelling faintly of sunscreen and coffee. Their laughter echoed faintly down the hall, fading like a dream. I took my time getting ready, humming softly as I packed my tote. I thought they'd gone to the beach early. There was a note on the dresser folded once. My heart leapt, maybe they'd planned a surprise outing. But when I opened it all, it said, "Was Mom, we'll be back later. Don't worry." That was it. No love mark, no heart. Just that single empty sentence. I went downstairs to the lobby, expecting to find them loading the car. Instead, the valet stand was empty and a gust of salty air blew through the glass doors. My reflection stared back at me from the polished floor, a woman in a faded cardigan clutching a purse too old for this place. "Excuse me," I said to the young clerk at the desk. "Did my family say when they'd be back?" He hesitated, eyes flicking to the computer. Mrs. Brooks, they checked out about 20 minutes ago. They said you'd follow later." My chest tightened. "That's impossible. We drove here together." He offered a nervous smile. "Maybe they left a message." He checked again, but there was nothing. No voicemail, no number to call, just the sound of rain beginning to tap the roof. I sat in one of the plush lobby chairs surrounded by tourists dragging their suitcases. I waited, watching every car that pulled up. They'll come back, I told myself. Maybe they just went for breakfast. Hours passed. Noon turned to afternoon. The coffee machine whirred behind the counter, the smell making my stomach twist. My phone stayed silent, no calls, no texts. Around 3, the manager approached gently. "Ma'am, do you have someone we can call for you, a friend, another relative?" I shook my head. "Just them." He sighed and offered me a cup of tea. The kindness in his voice nearly broke me. I went back to my room, but even it didn't feel like mine anymore. Their beds were perfectly made luggage gone. Only a single item remained on the nightstand. Stephanie's lipstick rolled open, the color smudged at the edge. The same one she'd worn when she kissed my cheek goodbye. I stared at that lipstick for a long time, realizing it was all the evidence I had that they'd ever been there. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the storm roll in over the ocean. Every thunderclap sounded like their laughter. By midnight, the hotel had gone silent except for the phone ringing at the front desk. And somehow, I already knew that call was meant for me. By the next morning, the rain had cleared, but the sky still looked bruised gray streaks over the ocean like the world itself hadn't slept either. I went down to breakfast alone, surrounded by couples in pastel sweaters laughing over pancakes. Every sound made me feel smaller. The waitress poured me coffee, and I caught my reflection in the metal carafe. Pale, tired eyes, the lipstick Stephanie gave me still in my purse, untouched. I wondered if this was how loneliness really began, not in silence, but in noise that no longer belonged to you. I stared out the window, and a memory flickered something Robert once said. It was our last summer together, sitting on the porch swing at dusk. He'd held my hand and whispered, "Helen, if there's ever a day you feel like the world's turned its back on you, open the box." I hadn't thought about that box in years. It sat in the bottom drawer of my old sewing chest, wrapped in brown paper. I'd brought it with me when I moved in with Mark, too sentimental to throw away. I rushed upstairs to the hotel room, my heart pounding. My suitcase was still half unpacked, the one thing they hadn't taken. I dug through layers of clothes until I found it a small steel box, cold to the touch edges, worn smooth with time. Robert had been an engineer for a security company. When he gave it to me, he smiled in that mischievous way of his and said, "Only you can open it, Helen. Combination's our anniversary date." I turned the dial with shaking fingers, 09/18/1974. The lock clicked open with a quiet sigh like it had been waiting. Inside lay 3 things, a small USB drive labeled in Robert's handwriting in case of trouble, a safe deposit key wrapped in a napkin, a folded piece of paper with a phone number scrawled across it, no name, just digits. For a long time, I just sat there staring. Part of me wanted to close the box and forget it, but another part, the one that had survived a lifetime of being dismissed, ignored, pitied, whispered, "Don't be afraid this time." I went downstairs to the front desk. "Is there any chance I could borrow a laptop?" I asked the clerk, the same young man from the night before. He hesitated, then nodded, sliding his own across the counter. "Just don't break it, Mrs. Brooks." The moment I plugged in the USB, a single video file appeared. Its name, Mark and Stephanie, July 18th. My breath caught. I double-clicked. The footage was grainy, taken from what looked like a hidden camera. The setting, our living room. My heart twisted. Mark was there pacing. Stephanie sat on the couch, flipping through papers. Her voice sharp and impatient. "She'll sign whatever you tell her to, Mark. She trusts you." "I don't know, Steph," he said, rubbing his neck. "It feels wrong." "Wrong," she laughed bitterly. "Your mother's sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars. You think she even knows what to do with it? We're saving her from herself." Mark said nothing. Stephanie leaned forward. "You want Olivia to have a future, right? That money's ours. Just get her to sign the transfer. Tell her it's a tax form or something." I covered my mouth. My son, my sweet boy, sat there silent while his wife planned to strip me of everything I had left. The video ended with Stephanie saying, "And once it's done, we take that trip. She'll never suspect a thing, the trip." I felt sick. My knees nearly gave out, and the clerk had to steady me. "Mrs. Brooks, are you okay?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Yes," I whispered, "better than I've been in a long time." Because for the first time, I wasn't just a mother, I was a woman who finally knew the truth. I copied the file onto the hotel's desktop and emailed it to myself. Then I slipped the USB back into the box. My fingers brushed the napkin-wrapped key inside. A safe deposit box. Robert must have left something else. I picked up the note with the phone number. My pulse quickened. It wasn't a local number. It had an Illinois area code where Robert's company had been based before he died. Could it be a lawyer? A banker? Someone who still knew him. I took a deep breath, grabbed the hotel room phone and dialed. 3 rings. Then a man's voice answered, calm but cautious. Hello, this is Helen Brooks. My husband was Robert Brooks. He left me a box and your number was inside. Silence. Then the man exhaled slowly. Mrs. Brooks, I was wondering when you'd call. Your husband told me one day you'd need help. And if you're calling now, it means the people you trusted most have already turned against you. I froze. How did you meet me tomorrow morning, he said. Bring the key. It's time you know what Robert really left behind. The line clicked dead. For the first time since the day they abandoned me, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was awake. I barely slept that night. The ceiling fan spun lazy circles above me, stirring the scent of sea salt and hotel detergent. My mind wouldn't stop racing. Who was that man on the phone? How did Robert know I'd one day need him? At sunrise, I dressed in the same blue cardigan Robert had loved, the one he said made my eyes look honest. I tucked the safe deposit key into my pocket and took a cab to Wilmington First Bank, the address the man had texted me just after dawn. The lobby smelled of old paper and coffee. A tall man in a gray suit approached me, maybe in his 50s, with silver hair and calm eyes. Mrs. Brooks, he asked. Yes. He extended a hand. I'm Mr. Grant, attorney for your late husband. Robert and I worked together years ago. We sat in a private office. He closed the blinds before continuing. Your husband was very deliberate, Mrs. Brooks. He anticipated what might happen after his death. He told me to safeguard certain assets until the time came. He unlocked a file cabinet and pulled out a folder thick with sealed envelopes. This is everything he left behind and one safe deposit box still registered in your name. My hands shook as I handed him the key. Together we walked to the vault. The metal door hissed open, revealing a narrow hallway lined with boxes like coffins. Number 1072 mine sat near the end. Mr. Grant slid the key into the lock, turned it twice, and handed the box to me. Would you like me to step out? He asked. I nodded. I needed to face this alone. Inside the box were documents neatly bound in Robert's handwriting bank, statements, property, deeds, and a letter resting on top. My name written across it in his familiar slanted scrawl for Helen when you can't trust anyone else. My throat tightened as I unfolded it. My darling Helen, if you're reading this, it means you're alone, and that breaks my heart. I worried Mark might let someone influence him. Stephanie's ambition frightened me, so I protected what we built. Half of our savings, our investments, and my life insurance were never deposited into our joint account. They're secured here under your name only. It's not millions, but enough to live free and safe. More importantly, I've arranged a trust in your name. If anyone tries to forge your signature or access your funds without consent, it will trigger an automatic legal alert. I wish I could be there to protect you, sweetheart. But now you'll have to protect yourself. Don't be afraid of them. Fear is how they control you. Stand up, even if your voice trembles. I pressed the letter to my chest and let the tears come. For the first time since Robert's death, I could almost hear his voice again, warm, steady, and certain. Beneath the letter was a second envelope labeled Contingency Instructions. Inside were several documents bearing the seal of Robert's company and a notarized form transferring a $2.8 million trust in my name held under a foundation called the Brooks Education Fund. Robert had created it quietly, naming me as the trustee. The fund could support charities' scholarships, or if I chose, be redirected to personal use. But if anyone proved deceitful or abusive toward me, they would legally forfeit any inheritance. I stared at the number $2.8 million until it stopped feeling real. Robert hadn't just left me money, he'd left me a shield. When Mr. Grant returned, I handed him the papers, voice trembling. Did he ever tell Mark about this? He shook his head, no. Robert suspected Mark might one day need to learn responsibility. He wanted you to decide when or if to reveal the truth. We drove back to the hotel in silence. My mind burned with a strange mix of anger and clarity. Mark and Stephanie had thought they'd taken everything from me. They hadn't realized the man they underestimated most, my quiet husband, had outsmarted them years ago. Back in my room, I spread the papers across the bed. Every line, every signature was proof of my worth and of their betrayal. For years, I'd been the quiet mother, the woman who smiled through insults, who said grace before meals even when no one listened. But now, as I looked at those documents, something inside me shifted. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't confused. I was the widow of Robert Brooks, and he had just handed me back my power. That night, I opened my laptop and began to type an email. Not to Mark, not to Stephanie, not yet, to Mr. Grant. I want to transfer the trust to a new name, the Robert and Helen Brooks Foundation, and I want to set terms for inheritance adjustment. He replied minutes later, "Consider it done." "Are you ready to proceed, Mrs. Brooks?" I typed back one word, "Yes." Then I leaned back, feeling the weight of years lift off my chest. For the first time since they'd abandoned me, I smiled not out of revenge, but because I knew the story wasn't over. They thought they'd taken everything. They had no idea what I still had left to give and to take back. The next morning, the ocean outside my window was calm again, deceptively calm, like a stage before the curtain rises. I checked the time, 8:07 a.m. My heart was already pounding. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day I took my life back. I dressed carefully, a beige blouse, slacks, a pearl necklace Robert had bought me for our 25th anniversary. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who finally resembled herself again. Wrinkles, gray hair, and all but steady. Determined. I took a cab back to Wilmington First Bank, clutching Robert's documents and the safe deposit folder like a lifeline. The same marble floor gleamed under my shoes. Behind the counter, a new teller greeted me with a polite, rehearsed smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you today?" "I need to see Mr. Grant," I said softly, sliding over my ID and the letter Robert had signed years ago. Her eyes widened slightly. She glanced down at the embossed signature and nodded quickly. "Of course, Mrs. Brooks. Please write this way." Mr. Grant was waiting in the same office, sipping black coffee. "You're early," he said. "I haven't slept," I admitted. He smiled faintly. "I didn't think you would." He motioned for me to sit. "You wanted to make changes to the trust," I nodded. "I want the money protected permanently, but I also want to make sure it teaches something. To Mark. To all of them." Mr. Grant folded his hands. "Tell me exactly what you want." I handed him a handwritten note I'd spent the night drafting. It read, "Upon my passing, the Brooks Foundation will continue supporting education for underprivileged children, not blood relatives unless they can demonstrate genuine care and responsibility. Anyone proven to have deceived, manipulated, or abandoned me will be permanently disqualified from inheritance." He read it twice, then looked up. "You're certain?" "Yes," I said. "I'm done being their victim." He nodded once and began typing on his computer. The rhythmic clacking of keys sounded like hammer strikes. Each stroke sealed a door they could never reopen. After the documents were notarized, he escorted me to a private vault for one final signature. Inside was the new trust agreement, $2.8 million in principal assets, now secured under the Robert and Helen Brooks Foundation. I placed my pen down, exhaled, and whispered, "There. Now they can't touch it." Mr. Grant smiled faintly. "Robert would be proud of you." When I left the bank, the air smelled different, cleaner, like freedom. I walked to a nearby cafe, ordered a black coffee, and sat by the window. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. But as I stirred the coffee, I caught sight of a couple walking by, a tall man with sandy hair and a woman with red lipstick. My heart stopped. For a split second, I thought it was Mark and Stephanie. It wasn't. But that flash of panic reminded me they still thought I was helpless. They had no idea I knew everything. I opened my phone and scrolled to the photo of the USB drive on my nightstand. That video, their voices, it was proof of what they'd done. I emailed it to myself again twice, storing one copy in the cloud and another under a false name, Helen B/evidence folder. Then I typed a new message addressed to Mark's email, but I didn't send it yet. "I know what you did. I know every word you said about me, and I know about the money, all of it. Don't bother coming back. You've already lost what mattered most." I hovered over the send button, but hesitated. No, not yet. This wasn't the right time. Justice, I decided, should arrive when they least expect it. Instead, I pressed Save as Draft. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed an old man at the next table reading the local paper. The headline caught my eye: Family Financial Scams on the Rise. Elder Fraud Cases Triple in Coastal Counties. I almost laughed. If only they knew what I was planning. Before leaving, I opened my purse and touched the envelope Robert's letter had come in. The words, "Don't be afraid of them," echoed in my mind. On the way back to the hotel, I stopped by a florist and bought a single white lily. I left it on the shoreline where Robert's ashes had been scattered years ago. The waves lapped at my shoes as I whispered, "You were right, Robert. They underestimated me, but I won't let them anymore." As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. A message from Stephanie. "Hey, Mom, we've been trying to reach you. Are you still at the hotel? Let's talk." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting, half fury, half curiosity. They were reaching out already. The game had just begun. I stared at Stephanie's message for a long moment, the phone trembling slightly in my hand. Let's talk. 2 words that in her mouth never meant kindness. I could almost hear her polished voice, sweet on the surface and sharp underneath. I typed a reply, then deleted it. No. They didn't deserve my words, not yet. Let them sweat. Let them wonder what I knew. That afternoon, I met Mr. Grant again at the bank to finalize the paperwork. He handed me a neat folder, official stamps, signatures, everything airtight. "The foundation is active as of this morning," he said. "You're now its sole trustee." I traced my finger over the embossed letters, "The Robert and Helen Brooks Foundation." The gold ink caught the sunlight, and for a moment it felt like Robert himself was there beside me. Now I said, "I need to set some additional terms." He raised an eyebrow. "Additional terms, I want this to be more than protection. I want it to be a test." He leaned forward. "Go on." I told him my plan calmly, precisely, like I'd been rehearsing it in my head all night. I wanted to transfer small symbolic sums to Mark and Stephanie, money they'd think was all that remained, a few thousand enough to bait them. Meanwhile, the foundation, the real fortune, would be locked under strict conditions, only accessible if they proved moral restitution. Mr. Grant's pen paused mid-air. "You're setting a moral clause." "Yes," I said firmly. "If they attempt to exploit me again, or if they falsify any statement, the fund will permanently redirect to charity." He smiled, slightly impressed. "That's rather brilliant, Mrs. Brooks." I shrugged, though a small part of me glowed with pride. "It's not revenge, Mr. Grant. It's a mirror. Let them see themselves for who they are." We drafted the clause together. Every word was deliberate inheritance contingent upon demonstrated repentance, verified by trustee. By the time we finished, dusk was settling outside the window. The city lights flickered on, reflected in the bank's glass walls like 1,000 tiny stars. I took a deep breath and signed my name. With the documents secured, I left the bank and stopped at a diner across the street, a cozy, old-fashioned place called Harbor Grill. The waitress, a woman about my age, poured me coffee and asked, "Rough day?" I smiled faintly, the kind that starts rough but might end beautifully. As I ate, I began sketching out my next step on a napkin, my handwriting looping steadily across the paper. Contact hotel management request, a copy of security footage from the day my family left. Gather all receipts showing wire transfers to Mark. Send anonymous package to Stephanie's employer. She worked at a real estate firm with evidence of her scheme from the USB. Wait, justice doesn't need speed, I thought. It needs timing. The waitress refilled my coffee, glancing at my notes. "Planning a business move?" she asked. I smiled. Something like that. When I returned to the hotel, night had fallen. The lobby lights glowed warm and low, the same clerk from before nodding at me with recognition. "Good evening, Mrs. Brooks. Any word from your family?" "Not yet," I said softly, "but soon." In my room, I set the bank folder on the bed and pulled out my phone again. Stephanie had sent another message. "Mom, we're worried about you. Please call us. Mark's been sick over this. We made a mistake. We want to make things right." I almost laughed. Sick over this. The only sickness Mark ever suffered from was greed. I didn't reply. Instead, I recorded a short video on my phone, just my face, calm and clear. Mark, if you're watching this, it means you finally realized what you did. I don't need your apologies or your excuses. I've forgiven you, but that doesn't mean you'll escape the consequences. You see, I learned from your father how to protect what matters. And what matters isn't money, it's truth. I saved the video to a private folder, naming it For My Son. Maybe someday he'd see it. Maybe not. Around midnight, I sat by the balcony window watching the moonlight ripple over the waves. My mind wandered back to Robert, his quiet laugh, the way he'd rest his hand over mine when life felt too heavy. "You'd be proud of me, wouldn't you?" I whispered to the empty room. "Your Helen's not so helpless after all." Then my phone buzzed again. A new message, this time not from Stephanie, a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Brooks, this is Detective Harlan from Wilmington PD. We received a complaint involving financial misconduct filed under your name. Could you come to the station tomorrow to clarify?" I froze, the words blurring for a second. A complaint? Filed by who? I didn't need to ask. I already knew. Stephanie had made her move, and that meant it was finally time for me to make mine. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in bed with the lamp on the letter from Robert open beside me, my mind running through every possible scenario. Stephanie had filed a complaint, probably claimed I'd stolen money, or that I wasn't of sound mind. It was exactly the kind of thing she'd do, twist the truth until it bent to her will. At 7 a.m., I called Mr. Grant. He answered on the first ring. "She's making her move," I said flatly. "Ah," he sighed. "I suspected as much. False claims of elder fraud are common when large sums are involved. But don't worry, she doesn't have a case." "She'll try anyway," I murmured. "That woman would burn a church if it meant keeping her name clean." He chuckled dryly. "Then it's time we light our own fire." By noon, I was sitting in the police station, a modest brick building with flickering fluorescent lights. The Detective Harlan greeted me kindly. A tall man in his 40s with tired eyes and a cup of black coffee permanently glued to his hand. "Mrs. Brooks, I just need to ask a few questions," he said, motioning me to a chair. "Your daughter-in-law claims there's been some confusion about financial transfers between you and your son." "Confusion?" I repeated, smiling faintly. "That's one word for it." I reached into my purse and pulled out a neat folder, every receipt, every document Mr. Grant had notarized, and finally a printed transcript from the USB video. I slid it across the table. "Detective, I believe this might clear things up." He frowned, scanning the papers. His eyebrows shot up. "Where did you get this recording?" "From my late husband," I said simply. "He was an engineer, kept things others would have deleted." Harlan leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "Mrs. Brooks, I think this conversation's about to take a turn your daughter-in-law won't enjoy." An hour later, I walked out of the station with a signed statement confirming that no charges would be filed. Harlan even escorted me to the door. "If they contact you again," he said, "call me directly. You're not the first parent who's had to deal with greedy children, and you won't be the last." Outside, the air was heavy with summer heat. Cicadas droned in the distance. I sat in a nearby park and pulled a small envelope from my purse, the one I'd written late last night, addressed in looping script, "Mark and Stephanie Brooks." I'd written it by hand the way my generation still does when something truly matters. Inside was no anger, no threats, just truth. "Dear Mark, when you were little, you used to build Lego towers and knock them down just to see how far they'd fall. You said it was fun watching things break. I didn't know then that you'd grow up to do the same with people. You and Stephanie took my trust, my savings, and my peace. But you can't take my dignity, not again. The money you thought you stole has been redirected to something better. Scholarships for children who still believe in kindness. The rest you'll never touch. Robert made sure of that. If there's any love left in you, Mark, prove it. Take responsibility. Show your daughter what decency looks like before it's too late. You'll receive a small transfer soon, a token. How you handle it will decide everything. If greed wins again, the foundation will close its doors to you forever. Your mother, Helen Brooks." I sealed the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and walked to the post office. The clerk stamped it without a word. The The sound, that sharp thump of rubber on paper, felt like a verdict. When I got back to the hotel, the manager met me in the lobby. "Mrs. Brooks, he said we have an envelope for you. Someone dropped it off earlier." My stomach tightened as I took it. The handwriting was unmistakable Mark's. I opened it carefully. Inside was a short note. "Mom, please stop. You don't understand what you've done. Stephanie is furious and she's not going to let this go. Please meet us tonight, same hotel room 214. Let's talk before things get worse." I read it twice, my pulse quickening. It was a trap, of course it was. But this time I wasn't walking in blind. I packed my purse deliberately. Robert's letter, the USB, my phone recording app. Before leaving, I slipped on the wedding ring I'd stopped wearing years ago. It felt cold grounding. As I stepped into the hallway, I whispered to myself, "You left me once. Let's see how you handle me when I don't stay quiet." The elevator doors closed around me, and my reflection in the mirrored panel stared back, calm, certain, ready. Tonight I would face them. And when I did, it wouldn't be the same helpless woman they abandoned at the hotel. It would be the woman they'd never truly known, the one Robert had prepared for this very moment. The hallway to room 214 smelled faintly of bleach and ocean air. My heels clicked softly against the carpet as I walked, my pulse matching the rhythm. The hotel felt quieter than usual, too quiet. A flickering light above the elevator cast a nervous hum through the corridor. I stopped in front of the door. My hand hesitated above the handle. For a moment I saw flashes of the past, Mark's tiny hand gripping mine when he crossed the street, his proud smile when he graduated, the way he cried at Robert's funeral. And then I saw the newer images, his cold eyes, his silence, while Stephanie called me useless. I took a slow breath and knocked. No answer. Another knock, louder. Finally the door cracked open. Stephanie stood there, perfectly composed, hair curled, lipstick flawless, wearing the same smug confidence that had once filled my kitchen. "Mom," she said smoothly, as if she hadn't abandoned me like luggage. "You look well." "I can't say the same about you," I replied. Her smile twitched. "Come in, we need to clear this up." The room smelled of cheap perfume and anxiety. Mark sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. He looked thinner, more exhausted. Maybe guilt was finally doing its work. Olivia wasn't there. Good. She didn't need to see this. I placed my purse carefully on the desk. "You said you wanted to talk." Stephanie folded her arms. "We just want this situation to end. You've involved lawyers, the police for what misunderstandings, I said quietly. "You forged my signature. You emptied my account. You left me alone in a hotel lobby like an old stray dog. Is that what you call a misunderstanding?" Mark lifted his head. "Mom, please," he said hoarsely. "You don't know the pressure we've been under." Steph thought. "Don't blame her," I interrupted. "You're my son. You made your choices." He looked at me for a long time, eyes glassy. "You don't understand. That money, it wasn't about greed. We needed it. The house, the debts." Stephanie cut him off, her tone sharp. "We were trying to secure the family's future, Helen. You hoard money you don't even use. Do you really need millions sitting in some fund?" I smiled faintly. "You're right, Stephanie. I don't." Her expression softened slightly, thinking she'd won. "But you don't either," I added. "Not anymore." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my purse, pulled out the USB, and placed it on the table. "Recognize this." The color drained from her face. "Where did you get that?" "From Robert," I said. He always was good with security systems, and apparently he recorded one conversation that changed everything. I clicked my phone screen, playing the audio I'd extracted earlier, the voices of Mark and Stephanie plodding around my kitchen table. "She'll sign whatever you tell her to." "I don't know, Steph. Just get her to sign. She'll never know." The room went dead silent. Only the sound of waves crashing outside filled the space. Mark's face collapsed, shame spreading across his features. Stephanie's hands shook, then clenched into fists. "That's illegal," she snapped. "You can't just record people without—" "It wasn't me who recorded it," I said calmly. "It was your father-in-law, and he left a very detailed file trail. The police already have a copy." Her voice cracked. "You went to the police. After you did, I said simply—" Mark stood up abruptly, his voice breaking. "Mom, why are you doing this? We can fix it, please." "Fix it," I whispered. "You can't fix betrayal, Mark. You can only face it." Stephanie stormed toward me, eyes blazing. "You think you can ruin us? You're just an old woman playing detective. You don't have the power to destroy my life." I stepped closer, lowering my voice until she had to lean in to hear me. "You already did that yourself." For a moment, she froze, her face hardening, then cracking into fear. I turned toward the door. I have nothing left to say. The rest is up to the law. As I reached for the handle, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I frowned and answered without thinking. "Mrs. Brooks," a male voice, urgent, shaking. "This is Detective Harlan. You need to leave the hotel now." I blinked. "What?" "Why, there's been an incident. We traced a suspicious transaction. It came from this hotel's server room. Someone's trying to transfer funds under your name right now. It's linked to your son's account." I turned slowly toward Mark and Stephanie. Both of them had gone pale. Stephanie grabbed her purse. "What the hell did you do, Mark?" he stammered. I didn't touch anything." The detective's voice crackled through the phone. "Mrs. Brooks' security's on the way up. Stay where you are." But before I could respond, the fire alarm blared. Red lights flashed across the ceiling. Panic erupted in the hallway doors, opening people shouting. I looked at Mark one last time. He mouthed something I couldn't hear. Then Stephanie bolted toward the balcony. The sirens wailed louder, drowning everything. And as smoke began to drift under the door, one thought cut through the chaos like lightning. They hadn't come here to apologize. They'd come to finish what they started. The alarm's shriek clawed through the walls, a stuttering howl that made every nerve in my body jolt awake. Red lights flashed across the ceiling like a heartbeat gone wild. Mark shouted something I couldn't hear. The noise swallowed his words whole. Smoke slithered in from under the door, curling toward the ceiling in gray ribbons. Stephanie was at the balcony door, yanking the handle with shaking hands. "It's locked," she cried. "They locked it." I backed toward the wall, heart hammering. "What did you do, Stephanie?" I demanded. She spun around, eyes wide and glinting with terror. "It wasn't me, I swear. Someone's trying to set us up." Her voice broke as the sprinklers kicked in, spraying freezing water over everything. The room erupted into chaos, papers flying, my purse tumbling off the desk, Robert's letter soaking instantly. Mark grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the hallway. "Mom, we've got to get out of here." Outside, the corridor was full of guests scrambling toward the stairwell. A bellboy shouted directions through the noise. Somewhere behind us, a woman screamed. I stumbled after my son, water dripping from my hair, the metallic tang of smoke stinging my nose. My mind spun in jagged pieces, the detective's warning, the transfer. The fire was this real or another one of Stephanie's games gone too far? When we reached the stairwell, Mark hesitated, looking back down the hall. "Where's Steph?" I turned. She wasn't behind us. The last thing I saw was her silhouette framed by the flashing red light of room 214, bent over her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. She wasn't escaping. She was finishing something. "Mark," I said, gripping his wrist. "She's not following us. She's trying to move the money right now." He froze. "What money?" "The foundation funds," I snapped. "Robert's account. You gave her access, didn't you?" His mouth opened, then closed again. His silence was all the answer I needed. "Go," I said, shoving him toward the stairs. "Get outside. What about you? I'll find her." Before he could stop me, I turned back into the smoke. My throat burned instantly, my shoes slipping on the wet carpet. The alarm drilled into my ears, but under the chaos, I could still hear it, the frantic tapping of keys. I burst back into the room. Stephanie's laptop glowed on the desk. Her face lit up in its blue light. The sprinklers had turned her hair to slick strands against her cheeks. She looked up when I entered, startled not by guilt, but by fear. "You don't understand," she gasped. "It's not me. The account. Someone's—" The screen flashed. "Transfer completed." She stared, eyes wide. Then she screamed. "No, that wasn't me. It's gone." I stepped closer, squinting through the haze. "What did you do?" Her hands trembled as she turned the laptop toward me. The bank's webpage was still open, Robert and Helen Brooks Foundation, but the balance line now read $0. Stephanie's voice broke into sobs. "It wasn't me, Helen, I swear. I just tried to just—" The door burst open behind us. 2 firefighters stormed in shouting orders. One grabbed Stephanie's arm, pulling her toward the exit. "This way, ma'am. We need to evacuate." I hesitated, staring at the empty account line. My heart should have been breaking, but instead I felt oddly calm. Because Robert wouldn't have left me defenseless. There had to be more to this. As the firefighters herded us down the stairs, I clutched my soaked purse tight against my chest. Inside, under the wet fabric, I felt the faint outline of something hard, the flash drive. It was still there. Outside the hotel's entrance glowed orange with reflected sirens. Dozens of guests huddled under blankets. I spotted Mark near the curb, coughing face streaked with water and ash. When he saw me, his shoulders sagged with relief. "Mom," he gasped, running toward me. "Thank God." "Where's Steph?" I pointed behind me. "Coming." She stumbled out a minute later, mascara running down her cheeks, clutching her laptop like it was a lifeline. When she saw Mark, she collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "It's gone, Mark." "The money's gone." He stared at her, dazed. "What do you mean, gone?" I tried to transfer it just a little to see if the system worked and the whole thing disappeared. Mark's voice rose. "What did you do?" She shook her head wildly. I don't know. "It wasn't me." Detective Harlan's voice cut through the confusion as he stepped out of a police SUV. "Mrs. Brooks." I turned shivering under the blanket someone had thrown over my shoulders. "Detective, what's happening?" He held up his phone, his face grim. "That transfer attempt triggered a security protocol. Your husband's company built years ago. The funds weren't stolen. They were redirected to a protected government escrow. Whoever tried to move them just flagged themselves for cyber fraud." Stephanie's sobs turned to screams. "You're lying! You're all lying!" Mark stood, frozen, staring at the ground. I looked at Harlan. "So the foundation money's safe," he said. "Untouchable. But your family here—" He gestured toward Stephanie, who was now being gently led to a squad car. They just made things a lot worse for themselves. I exhaled slowly, the weight of years slipping from my shoulders. "Robert," I whispered under my breath, "you clever man." The detective turned to me again. "One question, Mrs. Brooks. Did you expect this to happen?" I smiled faintly. "Not exactly," I said, "but I did expect karma to show up eventually." He nodded once, almost smiling. "Seems like it just did." Behind him, the hotel continued to flash red and blue, the night alive with sirens and murmurs. Stephanie's shouts echoed as she was placed in the car. Mark stood still, drenched and shaking, unable to look at me. I wrapped the blanket tighter and turned toward the sea where the first hint of dawn was breaking over the horizon. The storm was over. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end, because when people lose what they worship, they don't stop fighting. They start hunting. By sunrise, the fire was out, but the hotel looked like a ghost smoke curling from the windows, sirens fading into the distance. I stood on the curb, wrapped in a blanket, my hair stiff from salt and ash, watching firefighters coil their hoses like exhausted snakes. The air smelled of wet plaster and burned carpet. Mark sat on the sidewalk a few feet away, elbows on his knees, face in his hands. Every few seconds, he'd glance at me as if searching for words that didn't exist. Stephanie was gone. Taken away in a police cruiser, still screaming her innocence. The sound had already started to blur into memory. Detective Harlan approached again, his coat slung over one arm, a styrofoam cup of coffee in the other. "We'll need a formal statement later," he said, his tone gentle. "But for now, you can rest. We've secured the foundation account. Whoever tried to access it triggered a firewall. It froze instantly. Brilliant system, by the way. Your husband really thought of everything." I smiled faintly, though my chest ached. He always did. He hesitated. "There's one more thing. During the incident, we found evidence of multiple forged documents in your son's name, loan applications, transfers, fake IDs. Looks like Stephanie's been running schemes for a while. Your son may have signed a few, but the bulk was her work." "I see," I said quietly. "Then I hope he learned something from all this." Harlan nodded, then offered a small, respectful smile. "You're tougher than you look, Mrs. Brooks." "Toughness is just grief-wearing armor," I said. He looked like he wanted to respond but thought better of it. Instead, he tipped his coffee cup in farewell and walked back toward the chaos. I turned my gaze to Mark. He hadn't moved. His face was streaked with soot and tears, and for a moment, I almost saw my boy again, the one who used to leave dandelions on the kitchen table every spring. I walked over and crouched in front of him. Mark. He looked up, eyes red. Mom, I didn't know she'd do that. I swear I didn't. I believe you, I said softly. But believing you doesn't erase the choices you made. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I was weak. I thought she was right, that you didn't need the money, that we could handle it better. I don't know what I thought. I studied him for a long moment. He looked smaller now, deflated. You wanted control, I said. You didn't think I'd ever take it back. He nodded slowly, eyes cast down. What happens now? Now, I said, standing up. You face the truth. He followed my gaze toward the police cars. They'll arrest her, won't they? Yes. And maybe you too if you don't cooperate. He exhaled the sound fragile. Do you hate me? I shook my head. No, I pity you. Hatred's too heavy to carry. I've done enough of that already. He bowed his head again, and for once he didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just sat there broken. I left him like that and walked down the beach road. The morning air was cool against my face. Somewhere behind me, the hotel's neon sign flickered weakly. Ocean View Hotel, half its letters dead. By the time I reached the pier, the sun had fully risen. The sea shimmered gold waves breaking gently against the wooden posts. I leaned against the railing, clutching my coffee with both hands. From my purse, I pulled out Robert's letter, damp smudged but still legible. I reread the last line. Don't be afraid, Helen. When the world shows its teeth, show yours back. I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. You'd have liked this morning, I whispered. A little messy, but honest. My phone buzzed a text from Mr. Grant. The media's picked up the story. Wealthy widow outsmarts family fraud. Thought you'd want to know. I laughed quietly. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years I'd been invisible. Now my name was headline material. Then just as I was about to pocket the phone, another notification appeared, a voicemail. No caller ID, just an unknown number. I pressed play. Static filled my ear, then a man's voice, distorted and low. Mrs. Brooks, you don't know me, but I worked with your husband once. He left behind more than you think. Don't trust anyone from the foundation. They've been watching the account for years. Someone else wants that money. The message ended with a soft click. I stood frozen, the waves crashing below the wind, cutting through my cardigan. A chill crept up my spine. Robert's secret, was it bigger than just a trust fund? Behind me, the hotel ruins steamed in the morning sun. Ahead, the horizon stretched wide and endless. For a brief moment, I thought about walking away, leaving everything behind, the money, the lies, even the family name. But then I remembered Robert's words again. Show your teeth. I wiped the last tear from my cheek and squared my shoulders. If someone thought Helen Brooks was done, they hadn't been paying attention. The fire was over, but something far more dangerous had just been lit. 2 days after the fire, the Ocean View Hotel stood cordoned off behind yellow tape, its once gleaming windows blackened by smoke. I checked out of the temporary motel the police had arranged for me and walked to the pier again, the same spot where Robert and I used to sit, counting the gulls that stole French fries from tourists. The town was waking up slowly. Vendors opened their stalls. Fishermen unrolled their nets. Life went on, indifferent to the wreckage behind it. Mr. Grant met me there, wearing sunglasses and carrying a thin leather briefcase. You look better than I expected, he said. Better's a relative term, I answered, forcing a smile. He handed me a folder. All charges against you are cleared. The foundation's been reinstated under federal protection. And your daughter-in-law, well, she won't be posting real estate listings for a while. I exhaled. And Mark? He's cooperating, Grant said. Signed a statement confirming everything. The district attorney's likely to offer him leniency. He'll avoid prison if he completes restitution and community service. I nodded, looking out at the water. The sea was a dull silver under the cloudy sky, restless, endless. I suppose that's fair, I said quietly. Grant studied me for a long moment. You don't seem satisfied. I didn't want revenge, I said. I wanted peace. But peace doesn't come from seeing someone punished. It comes from letting go of the part of yourself that kept waiting for an apology. He closed the briefcase with a soft click. Robert would have said something like that. I smiled. He taught me well. After Grant left, I sat there for a while listening to the waves slap the pier. A few people recognized me from the news report, the elderly widow who outsmarted her greedy family. They smiled, some even applauded softly. I nodded politely, but inside it made me ache. They didn't know that winning doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like burying the last piece of your heart. That afternoon, I visited Mark. The police had released him into his own home, stripped of luxury since most of his assets were frozen. The house felt smaller than I remembered, quieter. He opened the door looking like a ghost of himself, stubble on his chin, eyes hollow. "Mom," he said softly, stepping aside. I walked in. The living room smelled of dust and regret. There were boxes everywhere, Stephanie's things gone, Olivia staying with friends. He offered me tea, but I shook my head. I didn't come to talk about the case, I said. I came to talk about us. He nodded, eyes brimming. I don't deserve it, but thank you for coming. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I reached into my purse and took out an envelope. This is the check for the restitution amount you owe the foundation. I already covered it. You'll work it off over time, helping rebuild the community center downtown. You'll sign the papers tomorrow. He stared at me, stunned. You're covering it for me? Yes, I said. Not because you deserve it, because your father would have wanted me to give you one last chance to remember who you are. His voice cracked. Mom, I'm so sorry. I shook my head. No, Mark, don't say it. Prove it. Be the man your daughter can be proud of. That's how you apologize. He nodded, tears sliding down his face. I reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder, the same way I used to when he was a boy, terrified of thunderstorms. For the first time in years, I felt something uncoil inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but space. As I left, he called after me, Mom, thank you. I didn't turn around, but I smiled. That evening, back in my small rented apartment, I sat by the window watching the sunset bleed over the rooftops. On my desk lay Robert's letter, now dried and pressed flat. I'd read it so many times that the paper had gone soft. Next to it sat the USB drive, my unlikely weapon, my salvation. I picked it up, turned it over in my palm, then slipped it into an envelope. I addressed it to the local historical society with a note for archival donation property of Robert Brooks, inventor and engineer. Contains personal files and correspondence of historical interest. It was time to let it rest. As the mail truck rumbled past, I closed the window and poured myself a small glass of wine. Outside, the town lights blinked on, one by one, ordinary and beautiful. Robert's voice echoed in my memory. Don't be afraid, Helen. I whispered back, I'm not anymore. The truth I realized wasn't just about what my family had done. It was about who I'd become because of it. A woman who finally stopped asking for permission to exist. The pain would never fully fade, but neither would the strength it left behind. And somewhere out there beyond the ocean and the ashes, I hope my husband was smiling, proud, peaceful, and maybe just a little amused at how thoroughly I'd followed his advice. A week later, the world finally grew quiet. No reporters, no police calls, no messages from lawyers, just the hum of my new refrigerator and the soft rhythm of the clock in my little apartment. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. One afternoon, as I returned from the grocery store, I found an envelope wedged under my door. No return address, just my name, Helen Brooks, written in block letters that looked almost mechanical. My stomach tightened. I carried it to the kitchen table and slid it open with a butter knife. Inside was a single sheet of paper, plain typed, Mrs. Brooks. You don't know me, but I knew your husband very well. Before his death, Robert worked on a classified security project. The file you found was only part of it. There's another account, one he never told you about. If you want to understand what really happened, come to Chicago. Bring the key. No signature. Just coordinates and a date. November 12th, 10 a.m. I read it 3 times, the words blurring into the paper. Chicago, where Robert used to travel for consulting work. My heart pounded. What could possibly still be hidden after all this? I looked out the window. The sunset washed the sky in gold just like the morning he died. For years, I thought the story ended with betrayal and forgiveness, but maybe it never ended at all. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into Robert's old box, and whispered, "All right, my love." One last secret. Then I turned off the lights, already wondering who would be waiting for me in Chicago. What would you have done if your own family had betrayed you like that? Would you have forgiven them or walked away forever? Helen's story isn't just about money, it's about dignity, survival, and learning that strength sometimes comes when we've lost everything else. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been left behind and found the courage to stand again, this story was for you. Tell me in the comments, do you believe people like Mark can truly change? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if Helen's journey moved, you don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video because every week we uncover new stories about family betrayal and unexpected redemption.